because I think what happened with the final review is sort of a symptom of where that fell in the timeline of having a bunch of writing, working off of it, making an installation, and then writing about the installation after. So like the writing part of it was the most formed idea, and then from there, if I had made more work since then, maybe the work would be more formed than the writing before, but that hasn't happened. I don't know. I mean, there can't be one without the other.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think about them necessarily in like a hierarchy, but I'm not satisfied. I've never been satisfied with visual work that I've made unless there's a lot of writing behind it, and I don't like writing being the final thing.
Right.
And that's just like a language thing. I only speak English. I only write in English. It feels so specific in ways that visual language doesn't have to be.
Right.
So that, in that sense, it's like, it's fine for what it does, but it's not, that's like another time texture
Right.
type thing. I don't know.
Okay, so I mean, there's one thing is to talk about what has happened in the past, but also if you had to, or like a review, which is like, you know, who cares kind of, but if you could aspirationally say,
Mm-hmm.
how would you see them functioning?
Together.
If time and space was no object, say,
Right.
sort of like how would the writing and the visual stuff, like you said, one can't exist without the other. So how would they work if you could you know, in your dreams?
The writing, I think my most ideal situation right now, and I know in like 4 months I'll hate this, but I would prefer anything that's written to be audio.
Okay.
And not something that is read. I think any visual reading I want to remain in like visual language, like art stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It could be performance. It could be with video. I mean, for that particular review, if I had another month, I was going to have the additional texture of audio and a bunch, like I had a ton of audio stuff that I wanted to manipulate and play with. I wasn't going to get into video necessarily, but I wanted there to be a ton of audio overlay and like different layerings of things. And that might be better than like the writing part of it. I mean, I like written statements because it helps me. I don't really care if other people know about them.
Yeah.
And I think in instances like that, and introducing people to your work and just being like, well, you have to say something, because you also don't want to be the asshole that stands up and is like, the work speaks for itself and I'm going to sit down.
Right, of course.
Everyone's going to be so upset because they're fatigued already with how much stuff they're looking at. But then the thing that I think I trip up about the most is context, and like the complete fullness of context is so important to me. Like where the work is, what color my studio walls are,
Right.
How do I talk about something briefly if I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about these 6 things like so intensely, I have to spell them out. And that's kind of like, that is supposed to help me with that. So those are all of my running thoughts of things that I would probably talk about now at this point, and they have to be so much more succinct, but it was fun to play with that.
It is interesting. Well, I mean, 2 things jump out at me. A, this thing about, and maybe this is just an art school thing, and once we're out of here, like, this stops mattering, but this sort of, like, the more you spell something out in the way that you were just talking about, like, okay, so there's these 6 things that I care about, and to the point that it's almost like it becomes like an installation idea, right? Like it's I care about the way that the space feels. I care about the texture of the thing. I care about the texture of the sounds people are hearing, as well, as well as there's this reading that I want to do, or there's this writing that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
So that becomes this installation idea, but also it becomes like the more you give away, in some senses, like somehow you're shooting yourself in the foot that way,
mm-hmm.
which is a weird thing. And I've run into this too. I find myself running into this problem probably in different ways, but giving too much away a little bit. And so it's like you have to somehow like limit yourself and actually like just edit yourself to a painful degree, really.
Or go ham.
Or go completely balls to the wall with it.
Which is what I did both of them, one in fall, one in spring. And it was very satisfying that at least Jaya picked up on that. But like the one in the fall, it was like, how do you give the least amount of information possible?
Right.
And then what happens, which like what I wanted to do, and I guess I did, I stood behind the review panel so they couldn't look at me.
Uh-huh.
So then they could just hear my voice and like look at the work, and then people kept being tempted to like look back to talk to me until they got tired of doing that and eventually just looked forward and then talked about their views of the art world, which was very satisfying to me. And then it wasn't really about my work. It was like whether or not Lucy and Jaya had their own debate about what was it? It was something with like authenticity and trickery and like who's a deceptor and whatever, and it just became like a weird conversation that was nice. And then afterwards Josephine was like, like all that you left people to do is just like talk about your Celtics hat and like read your biography, and then your biography's on the wall. So then for the spring semester I was like, all right, here's my biography and now it's out, so we don't have to talk about it anymore. What's next?
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I feel like it is very art school specific, and that reviews are a performance, whether you're a performance artist or not. You have to stand up with your work and give like, it could be an elevator pitch, it could be a diary entry, it could be nothing, it could be like Zach and just arranging chairs in a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What do you want to get out of it?
Right. I mean, so is that sort of
it's like a net sum.
Yeah.
It's like the more that you say, no one has to talk about. So the only thing that's left to talk about, which is, I think, why the review... I mean, it went exactly the way I thought it would, where there's just, like, 5 minutes of silence because you say so much that what's left to say. And it's like, I know this laundry list of reasons and things that I'm thinking about, and people think about me, and I think about my work. Let's get all of that out of the way. And then you have to think about something else to say, and it's going to take a while, but I will sit here and wait.
Right.
And that's what happened. So yeah, I'm not going to do that again, but it was like a nice little experiment.
Yeah, well, it's nice that you can sort of treat it that way as like an experiment, and also keep in mind that it's like, this is right now, and this doesn't matter.
Right.
As soon as we're gone.
Like at all.
At all. Right. At all. And as soon as you leave, the sort of like, people will still have thoughts about the work and still have thoughts about the way you present the work, mm-hmm. but it won't be in this like perform and now we're gonna say stuff about it type of way. Right. You're just like given like a little bit of. Anyways, moving on from reviews, we don't need to talk about that. So. Okay, so the first group crit that we ever did in your studio, I remember you had a very pretty specific laid out sort of plan for the semester, and I was struck by that because it was don't
so neurotic.
Think that way at all. It was pretty intense. So. And you had various projects you hoped to accomplish and thoughts about them. Did you stick to that plan?
Pretty much.
That's amazing.
I mean, not completely. I would say 70%, which for me is
that's great. That's a high degree of accomplishment.
I would say there was 6 series that I set out to do. One of them within a couple of weeks, I was like, this isn't happening. Another one fell off for a different reason, but was replaced by another one.
Mm-hmm.
So 4 out of 6 were done, and then 2 dropped off and 1 was put on.
Okay. So.
And it's also, I mean, to be transparent, I didn't have a studio 2 years leading up to then.
Mm-hmm.
One of those, the first year, I pointedly did not make it work or look at work.